All right, we should be recording. Once again, hello. And today's session is called If This, Then That. And we're going to be talking about creating learning paths with D2L release conditions. So at any time today, if you have any questions or want to share any of your experiences with the group, please do so. If you're not able to watch this live, then we will have the recording later on the CTAT website. So let's get started. The microphone is covering the arrow. Okay. I will give talk for about 20 minutes, and then we'll have time for discussion and for any questions at the end. Okay, so today our objectives are the following. Going to explain the importance for creating learning paths to determine student success. You already may be doing this. Hey, Brianna. You may already be doing this already in your online courses, but we're going to talk about how we can really create great personal learning experiences for students with learning paths. Also, we're going to discuss the best practices for creating release conditions, which is a feature in D2L that helps to create these learning paths. We're going to discuss how to effectively implement the use of release conditions in order to control the delivery of assessments, regulate the distribution of communication, and how to require learners to perform specific tasks prior to completing any key assessments. We're also going to identify which tools associate with release conditions and explore the different types of release conditions available in D2L and how to manage them. So before we talk about release conditions, let's talk about creating learning paths in your course and how you're probably already doing this and how we can do an even better job at creating these learning paths. So no matter what the subject matter might be or the background of your target audience, learning should be always a personal endeavor. But how you do offer online students, or how you offer online students the key takeaways and to fulfill goals and objectives while still catering these individual needs can be difficult with larger audiences. But these special release conditions that we're going to talk about today will hopefully help you with that process. So a personal learning path is learner-centered, and it's an approach that emphasizes learning specific goals and objectives as well as preferences. And each activity that you give your students provides them a better understanding of the topic, and it allows the opportunity to pinpoint individual learning styles and needs. So personal learning paths give learners control over their online learning experiences so that they can more effectively acquire and retain knowledge and skills that will help them in the real world. Even when creating personal learning paths for individual learners, the goals and the objectives of the course must still be an integral part of this process. And so the key to creating successful learning paths is to develop a plan that seamlessly blends the online course essentials with the needs and wants of each individual learner. And this can seem overwhelming, this can seem like a huge task, but by using these release conditions in D2L, I think you're going to be able to individualize these goals and objectives for these students, and besides being able to present them with key subject matter. So not all of your online learners have the same personal preferences or learning styles, and this is why it's important to create these learning paths by creating different activities and exercises. Let's see, auditory learners can listen to virtual lectures or podcasts. Your visual learners might benefit from videos and viewing image-rich content, while as others might opt for text-based learning. So providing your students with variety and different opportunities can also create those specific learning paths for those students. And it also falls down the line with universal design, creating and designing learning for students that's universal for all, that suits all needs. So even though through a personal learning path, there needs to be some direction and feedback, and so that's going to also be an important part of creating learning paths, is making sure that they get the feedback that they need, and the key is obviously to give them constructive criticism that they require, that they need in order to learn from their mistakes. So this is another way that we can create these learning paths for students and either redirect their goals or to send them in the continued path. So there are many advantages that we're going to talk about and that we're going to discover as we talk about release conditions. Let's also think about it this way. When you are providing your students with different learning pathways, you're also, as an instructor, you're receiving invaluable data. When you are creating these different paths in D2L, you're going to be able to see their user progress and to see, well, this student met this objective, so they can continue to the next step. This student didn't do so great, so they need to go back and revisit some content. So let's go ahead and talk about how we can develop these learning paths and how we can help our learners to embark on their own personal learning journey. So what is a release condition? Release conditions allow you to create custom learning paths through the materials in your course. You might already be using release conditions in your course, but they basically release a release condition. When you attach a release condition to an item, they cannot see the item until they have met the associated condition. So for example, maybe you set a release condition that they visit Module 1 before they're able to visit Module 2. Or you create a release condition that requires students to visit certain content topics and then before they're able to access in an exam. Now, it's very easy to meet the criteria for these students when it comes to content, because anybody can go through and click the material. So we also have to make sure that we're looking at the user progress that D2L provides and seeing how long they spend on each of these content pages, because they might go through the content, but if they went through the content in 8 seconds, they're not Superman, and I'm not sure that's going to be I don't think that they're going to be able to acquire the information in that short amount of time. And trust me, I'm sure you've seen it. Students do try this. But so those two things will need to play hand in hand, using the release conditions, but also monitoring their progress to make sure that they are going through the information, not just clicking through it. You can attach multiple conditions to certain items, and we're going to go over the different tools that support release conditions. So for instance, you might want them to go through 3 content topics before they're able to go to whatever the next task may be. You also do want to keep in mind that if you are having students visit content that is third party, maybe you have them go to a website, you're not really going to be able to assure that they are viewing that website in its entirety. Or if you link out to a website that has a video that you want them to watch, you can't really know for sure if they are looking at that content in its entirety. So you do want to keep that in mind, that even though it shows that students are going through the content, once they get to any outside links or websites, we don't know if they are visiting the content at that point. So keep that all in mind, please. So tools that support release conditions. The awards tool, I'm not sure if you use those in your class, but I recommend if you are not using the awards tool or the where you can create badges and certificates for students, that you attend one of Bruce's trainings on the awards tool. This awards tool all is under the whole trend gamification and providing students with those rewards for accomplishing certain tasks. For example, I use the awards tool in my INFS 1010 class, and they do not, they have to submit their 2 projects, and if they submit their 2 projects, they get a badge saying that they submitted them. It's basically for participation. That doesn't mean that they actually did a good job on it, but they are actually being able to get an award for submitting something to the Dropbox. So when you use that tool, you have to set the release conditions in order for that award to, I realize that I'm not going through the, I'm so sorry, through the PowerPoint. I'm looking at my own. Sorry about that. Trying to multitask. So basically, I am setting release conditions for that award, and they have certain criteria they have to meet in order to get that badge. So if they submit only 1 project, then they do not get the award, because the release condition that I set says that they have to submit, for example, Word 1A and 1B. So you can set multiple release conditions. I'm not sure if you use the checklist, but release conditions are available with the checklist in D2L. Content modules and topics, we've kind of already talked about that. Custom widgets, those are the widgets that are on your homepage. Discussion forums and topics. I've seen people use release conditions a lot with discussion forums. Assignments, same concept. Grade items and categories, intelligent agents, announcements, quizzes, and surveys. All right, so I have some tables that have the specific types, and we already talked about the awards and checklist. I'm not sure if you use competencies in your class, but you can also use release conditions on competencies. These go in much greater detail with descriptions, and I'm not going to go through each of these, but here's the examples of the content that we already hit on. The user must visit a specific content topic in order to fulfill the release condition, or they have to visit all of the topics. The discussion post, they have to author a discussion post before they can, before they're able to respond to others. You probably already used that one and didn't realize you were using it. Assignments, same concept as the others. I'm going to give you some specific examples in just a minute. And the PowerPoint, I forgot to mention, I think, is here for you to download if you would like. Quizzes. So let's talk about some best practices before we look at some examples and before I share my screen with you. So there are several best practices for creating release conditions. You want to make sure that you set up conditions before users access the course. You don't want them to get started in the course and then set release conditions, because this gives you a chance to check for mistakes in the conditions or for any circular, contradictory, or unnecessary conditions. And that's very easy to do, but you don't want the users to get confused by resources beginning to disappear. So for example, I'm teaching an online course right now, and the INFS 1010, and it's a very technical course. There's lots of information, and so, you know, it's okay for them to work ahead. It's a self-paced course, but I realized that I think they're overwhelmed by seeing all of the chapters there. And so it might be more helpful if I would only release like the first 3 or 4 chapters, and where they can't see the other chapters until, you know, a certain date, because it can overwhelm students. So, but at this point, going back to this best practice, it's not going to be very helpful. It's not going to be a good idea for me to go do that now. You want to make sure you avoid any unnecessary conditions. So, for example, you want users to read the topic before taking, maybe you want users to read a topic, take a quiz, and then once they do that, then they're able to go submit a Dropbox. Well, you're only, for the Dropbox, going to submit, or you're only going to set a release condition so that they can access, so that you set the release condition on the assignment that they've taken the quiz. And then for the quiz, you're only going to set the release condition that they've visited the content. So you don't want to set multiple release conditions on that folder. You want to make sure that it kind of is a, you have different, it's not all one release condition, it is several different release conditions. You want to make sure that you avoid a circular reference. I'm sorry, does someone have something to say maybe? I thought I heard a microphone turn on. No? Okay. Maybe I'm hearing things. You want to avoid a circular condition where you set a condition where where users must view a content topic before they can access an assignment submission folder, and then set a condition that they must submit a file to the assignment submission folder. So you want to make sure you don't make any circular references or avoid contradictions. It's very easy to make contradictory release conditions. So you want to also make sure you release content based on learning ability and course performance. I think this is a perfect opportunity for students that, okay, they did well, they went through the content, you did like a little self-check, maybe about a 5-question quiz to see if they understood the content. If they didn't do well, you set a release condition where they have to revisit the topic. Or if they mastered those 5 questions, then they can continue on to some more content pages, and then maybe get to another mile marker where they take another 5-question test. And if they do well on it, they can continue to go further, and so on. So you're really individualizing the learning and differentiating the course for your students. Okay. So let's talk about a couple scenarios about how you could use these, and I thought of some examples. So for instance, releasing content in stages. And once again, I'm not going to the slide, I'm very sorry. There we go. Releasing the content in stages. So I saw an example where, especially at the beginning of the year, students are notorious for not reading through the syllabus in its entirety. And let's just be honest here. So I saw where some instructors will provide the syllabus for them, and then students have to take a test based on the information in the syllabus. Well, if they don't do well on the syllabus test, they don't have a certain mastery, then they can't go any further than the syllabus. They have to go back and read the syllabus. They can retake the test before they get to the actual content of the course. And this is something that I might actually implement in my course very soon. Also, maybe an orientation module where you have different documents, course calendar, talk about how to navigate through momentum, and then students go through that module before they're able to go to the next module or to the actual content of the course. Also, you can customize content for groups within a course. So the business and accounting department, they use a pre-post test. And so they use to create groups, and then based on their specific class or their specific group, they were they created certain release conditions, so different tests went to them. So the business department students didn't get the accounting test, and the accounting students didn't get the business test. So you can create different release conditions and provide students with different assignments based on need. So how do I create a release condition? If you are... Okay, so I'm going to show you how to create a release condition. This is just one example for release conditions. There are several different ways that they can be utilized in D2L, but this release condition is going to require my students to visit the syllabus and to look at the syllabus before they are able to go to the Getting Started with Windows 10 assignment. And you can create multiple release conditions, and I will show you how, but I'm just going to add one for this particular example. So if I want my students to access the syllabus before they can start on the Getting Started with Windows 10 module, I'm going to select the Getting Started with Windows 10. This is what you're going to put the release condition, or what you're going to associate the release condition with. So I'm going to select Bulk Edit. Now, if you are creating your content and you want to add release conditions as you go through this process, then you would, when you are editing and you are formatting your content or you're adding different objects to your course, then this would be located under the Restrictions tab. So this is kind of a backwards method, a backwards way of creating your class. It may be that you want to create all of your coursework and add all your content to the course and then go back and add release conditions after you have everything lined out. So I'm going to select Bulk Edit, and if you notice, I can add dates and restrictions, add a description, all in one place. So I'm going to go to the, you can see when I hover over, it says add dates and restrictions, and this is for the Getting Started homework sheet. So students are not going to be able to know what to do for their first assignment unless they're able to access this. So when I click on that option, now you can see that I can add release conditions. I'm going to select Create, and I'm going to select the condition type, which in this case I'm going to go to Visited Content Topic, meaning they have to visit it before they can move on. And so for this example, I'm going to select the syllabus for my course and select Create. Now I'm going to select Update, but you also want to note that it says all conditions must be met. If I had several release conditions, maybe I wanted them to access the Getting Started activities where there is important information about course navigation and momentum, how to locate certain components of the course. I could set another release condition so that they had to access another content page or another file before they were able to access their first homework sheet. But for now, I'm just going to have the syllabus that they have to access before they can get to the Windows assignment. So I will select Update, and if you notice, it should note right here, if you've done it correctly, that students must meet this condition before they are able to move on. And then you would select Done Editing. That is just one example of how to add a release condition to your content topics. So basically that's it. If you are interested in creating release conditions and would like some more one-on-one training, then Bruce or myself would be more than happy to set up an appointment and work with you on this. And I really hope you can see how it can really help individualize learning and how it can help your students create their own learning paths and take control of their own learning. I think that was all. How do you envision using this in your course, or do you feel like that you could create learning paths where if students were not going down the right path, or they could go back to the content? How do you plan on envisioning, or how do you plan on implementing this in your course? Or do you have any concerns or challenges with these release conditions? Anyone? I talked a little longer than I meant to. Oh, there's Susan. Yes, I think I'm definitely going to try it for my syllabus, because I've realized a lot of students say, I don't know what to do with this, and I'm like, well, it's in the syllabus, so I think that that's a really good idea. No one ever reads it. Well, maybe this will encourage them to read it if they can't get to the content of the course without reading it and understanding what it entails. It's better to create the content first than to assign a release condition or do it. I'm not sure that really matters if you create the content first or do it when creating the content. Is it better to create the content first, then assign a release condition, or do it when... I don't think that really matters. It's probably personal preference. When people are creating courses, some people go in a sequential order where others might do the backwards design. I think it's easier to find, because I was having a little problem going back and finding where to edit. My brain just had a momentary lapse. And so I think it's probably easier when you are initially creating the content, but sometimes when you're creating content, you might not see the overall picture, and it might be helpful to get all of your content in there before you decide, well, I want my students to be able to do this before they can do this, or I want my students to be able to accomplish this before they can go to the next area in the course. So it might be more helpful to have all your content and all your activities, quizzes, discussion boards in there before you decide, you know, what's going to be required of them and how you want them to get through that material. Is there a way to do a release condition if you're doing quiz and exam using... No. I don't believe so, and please speak up, Susan or Bruce, if I'm wrong, but MyLabs Plus is a third party, and basically our students just log into D2L, and it redirects them to their account. The two are not synced in any way. If am I speaking right, Bruce and Susan? Correct. No, it's not a part of D2L. It is a third-party site. So they're just lucky they're able to access it through Momentum instead of having to go to two different sites. That's a good point, Brina. There might be a feature in my MathLabs Plus that has same concept as release conditions, but we don't manage MyLabs Plus, so unfortunately I wouldn't know if they do that or not. Good questions and good comments. Seeing, still typing. I'm sure it's not as easy. I haven't had much experience with MyLabs Plus. Okay. Any other questions or comments? I see a typo. The CTAT website. There's an E in Rome State, obviously. Thank you for attending, and I hope that you learned more about learning paths and how you can create those for your students by using release conditions. I really just wanted to provide you more of an overview about release conditions and how they could be used. I wasn't planning on really demonstrating so much. So if you would like more of a demonstration and to see how you can add them in your own course, then we'll definitely be more than happy to set up a time. So thanks for attending. Have a good day.